Thomas Günther. Thomas, I think there's nothing more to say, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for inviting me to give a keynote, which is really great for me. And I'd like to thank my also Carsten. He was here last time, and he actually did a lot of previous work presenting pyGIMLi, so I don't have to present this, not anymore. Anyhow, it's Florian, who's here. He's from the University of Bonn. And I'm not presenting any inversion formula or whatever. We will not see any formula because it's too early in the morning. I'd like to take you on a tour through inversion and what can you do to improve your inversion and to think a little bit wider than existing version. So what we all do is a typical ERT workflow. We have some, sorry?
No.
We have some problems, we have some solutions, we think at least we have some solutions. We do tough field work, do processing, then we go to inversion. That's what I'm going to speak about it. Sometimes it's a black box, sometimes it's some crazy nerd stuff that we don't understand. And then we do some post-processing discussion with geologists, and well, sometimes we start over from the very beginning because it's all crap what we did. Finally, we're writing the paper, and at this point we really have to think what are the rules of scientific conduct, and the relatively new but also very old idea of reproducible science. So the question is, can ours redo your work you're presenting? Which means, did you describe it sufficiently in detail? Are your data accessible? That's something we're going to speak about in the afternoon session or just before lunch. Is the software available? And also, and most importantly, can others benefit from what you did, or do they have to do it again and again, and do the same mistakes again and again? And that's our idea, that's our philosophy. It's basically to be reproducible. So we produce open software, we make open science, we make every data and script accessible to everyone once it's published, and everything's going to be tested. So even in 10 years, the research should be the same. Otherwise, the program is doing something wrong. But what we write, we're not passing ready software. We actually do, but what we want to do, or what we rather do, is to provide you a box of tools. But actually, you're the craftsman, not the craftswoman. So I'm going to talk about inversion. The end of inversion is to find a model that fits my data and is plausible. The last one is the key. It's the keyword because what's plausible. And that's the structure of my talk. So I'm going to present you some ideas of how to improve your results. Just showing you briefly some examples. But then I'm going into detail and showing you how to do it by yourself, because it's really easy with the software we are doing. And I'm going to present you pyGIMLi and BERT, and finally come to some laboratory monitoring. I'm going to show you details. So I'm going to go into detail. So if you have a subsurface, you're starting with nothing. I don't know nothing about a subsurface, but actually you do. But first you usually do an inversion, and you have some inversion result, and then you have some external reference data, like direct push data, for instance. And you say, well, it's not bad, but it could be better. Actually, the idea is to use this data. So you can use both structural information from the boreholes, but also from science, from GPR, but you also can use this parameter information. I talked about this last time in the 2013 workshop, so I won't go into detail about this one. Another idea that was recently still in publication is the idea of geostatistic information. If you don't have much information on structural boundaries, you might have information on how the resistivity is distributed in the subsurface, about correlation length, about angles and everything. That's something Claudio Giordi from ETH Zurich was working on. He's using geostatistical operators. We've seen a talk by Frederick on this, which is not only taking the neighboring cells into account, but a larger footprint, and this is really improving the result. I'm presenting one field case by myself, so I'm also measuring by myself, just to prove it. This is a normal inversion of a field case of a bank limestone. So we were expecting some banks which are parallel to each other. We can actually try to see them in the first inversion. So we see some structure which is looking like this, and we see those structures that we dig a little bit, and we look at the limestone. But the results are nice on the surface, but but not nice in the subsurface. But if you use this geostatistical recognition instead of the normal, slightly anisotropic inversion being favoring the vertical direction, we see much better image of the subsurface. We can see all those banks, and they really exist because it's really quite complicated area. There's many banks of limestone, and you can see them. Some of them are really going deep, some of them are not going deep. At the end, both models are, of course, equivalent because both are fitting the data to the same degree. It's your choice, but this is more plausible. So then I come to the next idea, which is called model reduction. So, you want to present the simplest model that's able to fit your data. That's Occam's razor, basically. The very often your subsurface and your whole problem is essentially 3D, but your measurements are just 1D or 2D or something like this. But you have 3D focus, 3D electrode or whatever. And this idea is model reduction. I just want to show you one example from my colleague Michael. So the borehole tool with ring electrodes. So ring electrodes are not point electrodes essentially, and there's some point that you stick into the ground. So you really have to account for the ring itself. So we're injecting. So we have the ability to inject current and to measure potentials or phases or lines or connected nodes, whatever. It's very arbitrary. So that the problem we are having is essentially 3D. It's a 3D current distribution, but the measurement is 2D actually. So it's downward and also inside the formation. If you see the apparent resistivity of the smallest Wagner array, we see that's the transition to Michael was talking about, and this is changing. So the question is, do we have to wait 1 year until all the drilling and water fluid effects are disappearing, or can we do it right from the very beginning? So the easiest model is to say, maybe the subsurface is 1D. So what you do is you create a 3D mesh, which is including your electrode. Those are the small rings, and that's the void inside of the surface. And you're including your electrodes, giving them special markers to mark them as electrodes, and then you can try to fit your data. And then you get a result which is, basically 1D. So I'm just showing a section. This has to do with geology, but it's not perfectly fitting the data. So what you can do is to say, maybe 1D is a bit too harsh. I'm doing it, I'm calling it maybe 1.2D. So say, maybe there's a near borehole zone which is influenced by the borehole fluid, and that's a far undisturbed zone. And then you have a it's almost 1D, but there are different features. And if you then compare two measurements, where you very early after inserting the instrument and later on, then you can really see that those zones are different, and that you really can catch up the far resistivity by this model reduction most effectively. And the fourth idea I want to present is just a combination of methods. That's very easy. We had also discussions about this one. That's just an example from a former PhD student from Lund University, Matthias, did resistivity and refraction cycling. So we have two methods with completely different resolution, different coverage, different advantages and disadvantages. If you combine them, in this case, in a structural coupled cooperative inversion, you're able to sort out a model which is, in this case, a cluster model which is representing your the relations between resistivity and velocity. And finally, you are really able to come up with a image of the subsurface which is much better substantiated because it's competitive with both seismics and resistivity. So these idea I want to present you now in some examples, showing some very simple codes, and those codes are based on our C++ library pyGIMLi. So I won't go into detail about this one because we have been presenting this before. When it comes to BERT, it's very useful for importing your data, processing your data, generating the meshes, like the ones you have been seeing, actually running the inversion, doing the visualization, doing post-processing. There are also specialized tools like spectrally constrained SRP inversion, there's large-scale ERT processing of time series, and so things like this. So we are right now in the transition of our BERT code from the second generation to the third generation. Just want to show you a little bit how it's looking like. Just to remind you, pyGIMLi, for everyone who's interested, just goes to pygimli.org and finds examples, tutorials, downloads, whatever. And there's also the BERT repository, and there's also binary installers. That's a tutorial. There's an extensive list of how-tos of people who solved the problem and who are contributing to our software, but just showing other people how to do it, so that they don't have to do the same mistakes again and again. So like, well, one of you, I don't see him right now, well, has a problem, and we are discussing, and you can include figures and whatever, and we get feedback how to improve the documentation, improve the software, and you get feedback on how to solve the problem. Just showing you very briefly on the petrophysical drawing inversion. So that's about the method comparison. So I'm just showing a synthetic model. We've been presenting this pyGIMLi paper. So you have a synthetic saturation model, assuming constant porosity. You can translate it with petrophysics, because petrophysics is important. I will come to this later on. So you take Archie's equation, Wagner equation, and you translate it into resistivity and velocity. Then you do some measurements, and you can do a single measurement just using a line like this. So you just take the ERT manager, create a forward operator, and put it into inversion in next step. And you get a resistivity result, you get a velocity result, and that's very simple inversion. And you can take those resistivity and velocity and use the petrophysics to put it back into saturation, and you get images which are, well, you have advantages from the seismic inversion, and the seismic inversion doesn't see those low situations, and of course not, because the waves are going around it. So, but what you also can do is to just combine those both forward operations by really 5 lines of code. It's not more than this. So you're really taking the petrophysics. So you're taking the normal forward operator and the petrophysical operator and putting it together into a framework which is in this called petrophysical modeling. And then there's another framework which is drawing modeling, and you just use those two petrophysical modelings, put them together, put in all your data, which are the apparent resistivities and travel times, and you get a result which is saturation by definition, and which you can also constrain by situation. So you can really say why saturation must be between 0 and 1 or whatever, because you can constrain saturation much better than resistivity. So this is my main example I'd like to present. This is a geological monitoring example, to come back to the point. It's a 2D aquarium measurement. So we have a 2-meter aquarium quite a few years ago, filled with sand, but there's a slope of the sand, and there's some water here. So we started off with salt water. We were interested in how saltwater freshwater interfaces are developing in the dynamics, and whether we can model it, whether we can see with ERT in the small scale, but then also in a field scale. So it's an aquarium. It's 2 meters by 50 centimeters high, but there's only 30 centimeters of sand, and there's slope and water, but it's 5 centimeters wide. So it's 3D. So we have 2D electrodes, otherwise we would have laid like lines of electrodes, but you don't have to. So what we do is to take this model, which is coastal aquifers. We have some electrodes, then there's Günther area, whatever. I won't go into detail about this. What we do is to first start with a model. So I want to show you how to do this with pyGIMLi, because it's really easy. So I'm just defining some points starting here from 0, -0.3, this point, this point, this point, this point. I'm just connecting them just by one call. Create polygon means create polygon. So they put in this position to say it's closed polygon and you give them a marker, number 1. Then you see this geometrical primitive. Next step, you want to mark. You want to separate your water and your sand. So you create an additional edge between here, just by calling create edge. So you're just connecting this point with this point. That's it. Then you're adding a region marker, so that you have 2 regions. There's a region number 0 in the water, and there's a region number 1 in the sand. Then you add your electrodes. So you need to read it from file or something like this. But you just create a node, give them a special marker, but it's not too important. So you just iterate through all the electrode positions, put them into the mesh, and well, here they are. And basically this geometrical primitive, which is not a mesh yet, you put it in the mesh generator. Why? Just called plain mesh. You use speech for some quality, some refinement quality criteria, and so on. And then you end up in the mesh. What's a mesh? There's a 2D mesh. But actually your subsurface is 3D. So we go to 3D. So we just take this 2D mesh and make a 3D mesh by using Z on this. Actually, it's a Y vector, which is going from minus 2.5 centimeters to plus 2.5 centimeters, so that the electrodes are in the middle, like they are in wheel. And you just create a 3D mesh by using this 2D mesh and the vector. In the end, you obtain a triangular prism mesh, where you have a water body sitting here, because you know something about water. You have the conductivity meter in the water. So that's what you should use. But you also have all those different markers. So I'm displaying the marker. So all those triangle prisms lying behind each other, they have the same marker. So they can easily be just used as one item in the inversion. So that's what I'm doing in the so-called region file. You also can do it from Python. I'm just saying all regions, which is a star, are single region, which means, although they consist of 10 triangular prisms, they are connected. And that's only one unknown, so that the inverse problem will be 2D. So you have logarithmic transformation, you have a lower bound because you know it must be saltwater times the formation factor, which is easy to determine. So you can really constrain your model. And then you say, okay, but I still need smoothness between my sets. So I'm doing an interregion constraint, so normal smoothness between all sets. And finally, I'm fixing the water layer here, which layer I'm measuring. This could be also time dependent, that's no problem. So, then you see, it's 2D inversion result, and you see the freshwater. Maybe we start from the very beginning. So, at the beginning we have saltwater everywhere. So I'm transferring this into fluid conductivity, and we have saltwater anywhere, and then we are dropping freshwater on top of it. And freshwater is building freshwater lands, which is really looking like this. And we have a smooth transition. We can improve it, but that's a quite old result. I didn't find a new one. But if you want to compare it to the truth, that's the good thing about the aquarium. You have images, so we have photographs starting to put some freshwater on it, colored with some dioxin. And you see the freshwater land is establishing by a rejoining with freshwater. So you have an increase in freshwater land, and you can really nicely see it in the ERT inversion result that it's matching. Really nice, also to a later stage when it's constant. We did some other experiment. We did some flooding and everything. Coming back to the end, I'd like to summarize a little bit and give some guiding recommendations. So try to describe your model as accurate as possible. So when you have extended electrodes, model extended, so then 3D, model 3D. But try to reduce your ambiguity. We always have it. And usually last choice is a smoothness constraint. The reason why you don't know much better. But we can do more. We can reduce our model to the essential. Maybe it's sometimes 2D, 1D, 1.5, or something like this. You can, for the last example, you could even do a structure-based inversion. Just instead of having a smooth model, it's having reference points on certain stages and inverting for the freshwater resistivity, for the saltwater resistivity in the sand, and for the depth at this point. That's also possible. That's a structure-based inversion. We also did it before. Another question is fix or limit, whatever. It's no like a water body. There's no need in trying to find out whether the resistivity is resolving. It's there, you know the resistivity is easy. But it's also important to, if the subsurface is not constant, if you have different geological units, subdivide them and control them individually. Use case-specific nomenclature, upper, lower bounds, and everything. Use specific, let's say, smoothing, damping, combinations of those. Different ones in the temporal domain and the spatial domain. And any information you have to the inversion. Of course, at first you're trying to see what the inversion is seeing, but And at the end, you want to have the best result. So whatever information you have, structure information, parameter information, put it into the inversion. And try to think, or even formulate your inversion in the target parameters, like salinity, hydraulic conductivity. I didn't speak about the fully coupled hydrogen physical inversion because we presented this last time on the GELMON. But sometimes it's really beneficial to couple those processes or put the petrophysics into the model. Even if you don't know the parameters, you can even invert for the spatially variable petrophysical parameters. That's all possible. So there are no bounds for you if you spend little time, and that's my take-home message. So yeah, you can start with black box software. If you just put it into BERT, it's also black box. But I would encourage you to play around with pyGIMLi-based framework. Try to benefit from others. Try to give back to the others, and then contribute. Thank you for your attention, especially the German organizers for very nice work. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Thomas, for these wonderful insights. I don't know about you, but I think he always makes it look so easy, doesn't he? So,
that's why I showed the code. It's easy.
Yeah, beautiful. Any questions for Thomas?
Thank you very much. Insightful, great presentation. Could you go back to the previous slide? Just one slide back? Yes. I like this summary, and I agree most of all points. But besides two, one is the reduced model to D1D. But in my opinion, fortunately or unfortunately, we live in 3D world. Everything is 3D. So assuming the 3D in 2D or 1D, the cause of error. That's my opinion. And the second thing is regularization. I like to use geostatistics. But if you look at the outcrop or underground carefully, sometimes or often underground structure change rapidly. There is some sharp boundary. So in this case, smoothness constraint or damping, in my opinion, is also the cause of error. So if you look at the underground, we have to accept the very sharp boundary. So besides the 2 points, I like this summary.
Yeah. So I don't see any contradiction regarding to the first point. That's why I'm saying model in 3. But if the subsurface can be described by one assumption or one model, or an easier model of a fewer number of unknowns or assumptions, it's always beneficial to do it. And if you simplify it too much, then you will see you won't fit your data. Then you have to go back a little bit, like I showed in the Rücker problem. And coming to the second point, of course, there's no single best solution, and there's even not a single best solution for the whole subsurface. So that's why you should divide your subsurface. You should use any structural information, and you can use geostatistical regularization in one part of the geology, like in the aquifer, because you have some idea on how the aquifer was deposited. And then you can use a totally different regularization in your clay or in the uncertified zone, because the geostatistics is different. There's no smoothness or irregular arts constant or whatever. So whatever information you have in mind, even though it's a fuzzy information, you should try to put it. This answers your question.
Can I put discussion?
Yeah.
Okay. So it also depends on the quality of your data or our data. If you have only very noisy data set doesn't have enough information to resolve 3D structure. Maybe we have to accept 1D or 2D because of data is very bad or noisy. But if we can get good data, then I think I like to invert the underground in 3D. That is my dream or something.
Yeah. If you have 3D kind of the distribution, then you will have to do 3D, of course.
A couple of quick questions. Try to go on a fourth level.
So I think this is brilliant, and I think this is the fact that you implement this as a conduct module and in reproducible research I'm not sure if everybody realizes the transition that we have here, that you basically can do an inversion where everything is exposed and you can send it to somebody else and they can do this again. So I would say apart from the structure and the implementation of this, we all should be doing this. I mean, like, we all should be eating the pyGIMLi or the Python notebook figures. I really like what you're doing also because this opens up the ability to do coupled modeling with things like LandLab and other kind of stuff. So the whole transition toward reproducible research, and if you can make it work, is just amazing. So I just want to, put my admiration that you did this as an open source thing, because if we can reproduce and if you can see, because the thing is, rather than sending somebody, hey, here's my image, you send this is my processing. And somebody else can say, I can reproduce it and I can tune this button. And so now we can say, hey, I didn't understand this. And it changes the sign. So this is amazing, and we all should be doing this kind of stuff there. So not a question, just my full admiration for you doing this.
Thank you.
Anyway.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's much appreciated. I agree with you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Bonnie.
Thomas, in your freshwater saltwater experiment, you showed a nearly perfect match between the experimental photographs and the inversions. But what is the reason for the funnel-like structure on the left boundary in your inverted results? So what is this?
Well,
Yes.
it's just missing resolution. So we have electrodes. You see, we have electrodes from here, but of course we don't have a good resolution here.
Okay.
We would need electrodes down here, but that's not what we were interested in. We were interested in this part.
Okay.
But of course, that's why. That's the smoothness. Smoothness taking over positions where you don't have data resolution. It's not data driven, it's model driven.
Okay, I think unless there's any more burning questions, I'd like to thank Thomas again for this great talk. And we're now moving on to the second keynote.